On the morning of July 31st, 2021, Angharad Williamson called police in South Wales and said her 5-year-old son, Logan Mwangi, was missing. At first, it sounded like every parent's nightmare. A little boy gone from his home. A desperate search beginning in panic. But within hours, Logan was found in the River Audmoor, close to where he lived. And the evidence did not point to a child who wandered away. It pointed back to the house. Back to the people inside it. Back to the lie that Logan was missing, when the truth was far worse than anyone knew. By the morning of July 31st, 2021, the story being told. Inside that house was already a lie. It began with a phone call. Angharad Williamson contacted police and reported that her 5-year-old son, Logan Mwangi, was missing from their home in Sarn, Bridgend. The words alone were enough to trigger panic. A child had vanished. A little boy was not in his bed. A mother was saying she did not know where he was.
Please help me, please.
Where are you?
My son's not here. My boyfriend's not here. Help
Take
me,
a breath.
please.
Take a breath, because I can't understand you when you're crying. Where are you?
5 Lower Lansdowne, Freddie the Song.
Lower what, sorry?
Lower Lansdowne, Freddie the Song. Saying somebody is not here.
Okay. Who's not there?
My son, he's alive. He's not here.
Okay, take a breath. When did you see him last?
I don't even in bed last night, and I've just got up for my son, and the other one's not here. Logan!
Okay, take a breath. He's 5 and he's gone. Can you see it?
Logan! Logan!
I need you to speak to me.
At first, it looked like the beginning of a desperate search. Police were told Logan had somehow left the home. The implication was terrifying but simple. A young child had wandered out into the early morning, alone, vulnerable, and unseen. For any family, that would be an emergency. For police, every minute mattered. The first question was obvious. Where could a 5-year-old boy have gone? But almost immediately, the case began to feel wrong. Logan was not found miles away. He was not found after a long search across unfamiliar streets. He was found close to home, in the River Audmoor. The place where his body was discovered changed the entire direction of the investigation. What had been presented as a missing child report was now something much darker, because Logan had not simply disappeared. And once officers saw the condition of his body, the story of a child wandering from home began to collapse. In the first hours of a missing child case, investigators often work outward. They search paths, roads, water, nearby homes, fields, gardens, anything a child could have reached. But in Logan's case, the evidence began pulling them backward, not away from the house but toward it. That is where the tension of this case truly begins. The adults inside the home had offered police one version of events. Logan was missing. No one knew where he had gone. They were frightened. They needed help. But the physical evidence was already telling a different story. Logan's body was not just a discovery. It was a contradiction. A missing child case usually begins with uncertainty. This one began with a performance. The people around Logan wanted police to believe there had been a sudden disappearance, but the facts did not move in that direction. The timeline did not move in that direction. The condition of Logan's body did not move in that direction. Everything pointed back to the same place, the home where he had last been seen alive. And that made the morning of July 31st even more disturbing. Because while police and searchers were responding to what they believed was an emergency, the people closest to Logan already knew more than they were saying. This was not a family waking up to an unexplained disappearance. This was the beginning of a cover-up. The question was no longer, where is Logan? The question became, who put him there? That shift matters. It is the moment the case stops being a search and becomes an investigation. It is the moment the emotional panic of a missing child report gives way to the colder work of evidence. Timelines, movements, phone activity, CCTV, clothing, bedding, statements, and every small detail that might show what really happened before that 999 call. Because if Logan had not walked out of the house by himself, then someone had carried him out. And if someone had carried him out, then the missing child story was not a mistake. It was a decision. That morning, the adults in Logan's life tried to make the world look in the wrong direction. They wanted everyone to look outside, toward the river, toward the streets, toward the possibility of a child lost in the dark, but the truth was not outside. The truth was inside the house. When police found Logan Mwangi, the search was over, but the investigation had only just begun. His body was discovered in the River Audmoor, close to his home in Sarm, shortly after the 999 call was made. He was only 5 years old. A child that small should not have been alone, near the water, in the early morning. He should not have been outside without anyone seeing him, and he should not have been found in a place that raised more questions than it answered. At first, the adults in Logan's home wanted police to believe this was a missing child case. They wanted the story to sound like panic. A little boy had vanished. Maybe he had wandered out. Maybe something terrible had happened after he left the house. But the moment Logan was found, that story started to break, because the river did not explain everything. It explained where Logan's body had been placed. It did not explain what had happened to him before he got there. And once investigators began looking closely, the evidence pointed away from accident and toward violence. Logan's injuries were severe. They were not the kind of injuries that could be brushed aside as a fall, a slip, or a simple childhood accident. A post-mortem examination found that he had suffered more than 56 injuries. The injuries were so extreme that a pathologist compared them to what might be expected after a fall from a great height or a high-speed road traffic collision. That was the first major fracture in the missing child story. A 5-year-old boy had not simply walked out of his home and ended up in the river. His body showed signs of something far more brutal. And for police, that meant the focus had to shift. The river was no longer the main scene. The house was. That is the disturbing reversal at the center of this part of the case. In a normal missing child investigation, police expand the search outward. They look beyond the home. They ask where a child could have gone, who might have seen him, what paths he might have taken. But in Logan's case, every answer pulled investigators back inside, back to the people who were supposed to be protecting him, back to the final hours before the emergency call, back to the version of events that had been handed to police as if it were truth. The discovery of Logan's body did something no one in that house could control. It gave investigators physical evidence. It gave them a timeline to test. It gave them injuries that had to be explained. And it made one thing clear. The people who said Logan was missing had not told the whole truth. From that moment, the question changed. It was no longer just, how did Logan end up in the river? It became, what happened to Logan before he was placed there? That difference matters, because if Logan had died in an accident, there would be panic. There would be a call for help. There would be an attempt to save him. But what investigators were beginning to see looked different. It looked like a child had been seriously injured, and then instead of calling an ambulance, the adults around him tried to create a new story. A story where Logan was missing. A story where the river was the tragedy. A story where the house was not the crime scene. But Logan's body would not let that story survive. The injuries forced police to look harder. The location forced them to question the timeline. And the behavior of the adults in the home forced them to ask whether the grief being performed in front of them was real panic or part of a cover-up already in motion. There are moments in a case when the evidence quietly changes everything. This was one of them. The discovery of Logan Mwangi did not just bring an end to a search. It exposed the first outline of a lie. A child had been reported missing, but the facts were beginning to show something much worse. Logan had not wandered into danger outside the home. The evidence showed the danger had already been around him. At first, the adults in Logan's home wanted police to look outward. They wanted officers to search the streets, the riverbank, the area around the house. They wanted the fear to move away from them and into the outside world, where anything could have happened to a 5-year-old boy in the dark. But evidence has a way of pulling a story back to the place it began. And in Logan's case, everything kept pulling back to the house. The discovery in the River Audmoor did not support the version of events that had been given to police. Logan had not simply vanished overnight. He had not walked out of the home unnoticed and ended up in the water by accident. The more investigators examined the timeline, the more impossible that story became, because Logan's body had not arrived there by chance. He had been taken there. That was the moment the investigation turned. What began as a missing child report became something else entirely, a murder inquiry built around a cover-up. Police were no longer only asking where Logan had gone. They were asking who moved him, when they moved him, and why the people closest to him were pretending not to know. The answer would lead directly back to John Cole and Craig Mulligan in the early hours of Saturday morning, before Angharad Williamson made the 999 call. Cole and Mulligan took Logan's body out of the house and brought him to the river. The purpose was not confusion. It was staging. Logan was placed in the water so it could look as though he had wandered away and drowned, or so the river could be used to explain injuries that had already happened before he was ever found. That detail changes the entire emotional shape of the case, because a genuine accident leaves people desperate for help. A real emergency creates chaos, panic, and urgent calls for medical assistance. But what happened here was different. There was time to think, time to move a body, time to create a false scene, time to decide what police would be told. And then came the phone call. Angharad Williamson reported her son missing, as if she had woken to every parent's worst nightmare. Cole and Mulligan pretended to search. On the surface, it looked like concern. But beneath that performance, investigators would later find a plan already in motion. The missing child story was not a missing tounding. It was a cover. For police, the task now became colder and more precise. They had to strip away the performance piece by piece. Every movement mattered. Every phone record mattered. Every camera angle mattered. Every object inside the home mattered. The timeline was no longer just a sequence of hours. It was evidence. Who was awake? Who left the house? Who returned? What was said to police? What was removed? What was washed? What was hidden? The answers to those questions would determine whether the adults in that home were grieving witnesses or active participants in concealing the death of a child. And one by one, the facts began to close in. The river was supposed to misdirect investigators. Instead, it exposed the lie, because the body, the injuries, the timing, and the behavior of the adults did not point to a tragic accident outside the home. They pointed to violence inside it. That was the investigative turn. Logan Mwangi was not a missing child who had wandered into danger. He was a 5-year-old child whose death was later proven in court to have been disguised as a disappearance. And from that point forward, the story the adults told no longer controlled the case. The evidence did. In the beginning, the lie was simple. Logan was missing. No one knew where he had gone. His mother had woken up and discovered her 5-year-old son was not there. John Cole and Craig Mulligan were searching. The adults in the house wanted police to see them as frightened, confused, and desperate.
Something wrong!
Okay.
Where is Logan? Where is Logan,
He's
please?
still with us in the moment. He's still in the hospital with doctors.
What happened to him?
Can't explain anything further at the moment.
Why is nobody talking to me? You're supposed to be helping find out what happened, not arresting me when I'm telling you my son.
Okay.
What is wrong with you guys? You're supposed to be helping me.
Angharad, I understand you're upset. I understand.
Is your son dead? Is your son been found in a river?
Okay, Angharad. We understand you're very upset. We've got an investigation.
I'm very upset. I've just lost my son. You've taken my husband.
But evidence does not respond to performance. It responds to movement, time, objects, records, patterns. And in Logan's case, those quiet pieces of evidence began to dismantle the story almost immediately. Angharad Williamson claimed she had been asleep during the critical period, with no knowledge of what John Cole and Craig Mulligan were doing. If that were true, then she could present herself as a shocked mother waking up to an unexplained disappearance. She could keep herself outside the cover-up. She could say the same thing again and again. I did not know. But the evidence did not leave her there. Phone activity showed that she was not simply asleep and unaware. Phone activity showed that she was not simply asleep and unaware. CCTV also captured activity inside the house during the time Logan's body was being taken away. And according to the judge, That made her account completely unbelievable. She was not a mother separated from the plan. She was awake. She was moving. She was part of what happened after Logan died. That was one of the first cracks. Then investigators looked closer at what happened inside the house. There were things that needed to be explained. Clothing, bedding, items that should not matter in a normal missing child report but mattered deeply in a murder investigation. Because people who believe a child has wandered away do not usually begin identifying evidence. They do not focus on what needs to be removed. They do not clean the scene before calling for help. But that is what the evidence showed. While Logan's body was being taken to the river, Williamson's activity in the house led her to identify his dinosaur pajama top as something that had to disappear. The top had been torn into 3 pieces. She also identified his bedsheet as incriminating. When Cole and Mulligan returned, she gave them the pajama top so they could take it away. Then she put the bedsheet into the washing machine. That detail is devastating because it shows calculation, not panic, not confusion, not a mother overwhelmed by terror. Calculation, a washing machine, in a case like this, is not just a household object. It becomes part of the timeline. It asks a question that no lie can answer cleanly. If Logan was missing, why was evidence being washed? If the adults truly believed he had wandered outside, why were they dealing with clothing and bedding inside the home? The answer was becoming impossible to avoid. They knew the danger was not outside. They knew the truth was inside. The 999 call came after those decisions. Williamson reported Logan missing, just as the plan required. Cole and Mulligan acted as though they were searching for him. On the surface, it looked like a family in crisis. But beneath that surface, the evidence showed something colder. A staged emergency built after the death of a child. That is why this part of the case is so important. The investigation did not rely only on one confession or one dramatic discovery. It relied on the small things that liars forget will speak for them. A phone that shows activity, a camera that catches movement, clothing that is removed, a sheet that is washed, a search that begins only after the seam has already been shaped. Piece by piece, the performance came apart. The adults in the house wanted police to believe Logan had disappeared into the morning darkness. But the evidence kept pointing back to the same place, the same hours, the same people. It showed that Logan had not simply gone missing. It showed that after he died, the people closest to him tried to control the story of his death. And that was the moment the investigation moved from suspicion to something much stronger. Because the lie was no longer just being questioned, it was being proven. Some lies are spoken, others are washed, carried away, or hidden before anyone arrives to ask questions. In Logan Mwangi's case, the cover-up did not begin with the 999 call. It began earlier, inside the house, in the quiet decisions made after a 5-year-old boy was already dead. There was no ambulance call, no desperate attempt to save him, no honest account of what had happened. Instead, the adults in that house started dealing with the evidence. That is where the case becomes even colder. According to the sentencing remarks, Angharad Williamson identified Logan's dinosaur pajama top as something incriminating. It had been torn into 3 pieces. She also identified his bedsheet as evidence that needed to be dealt with. These were not random household items. They were part of the final hours of a child's life, and they knew it. When John Cole and Craig Mulligan returned after taking Logan's body to the river, Williamson gave them the torn pajama top so they could take it away. Then she put Logan's bedsheet into the washing machine. It is a small domestic image, and that is what makes it so disturbing. A washing machine running inside a home where a child has just died. A bedsheet being cleaned while a false missing person story is being prepared. A mother not calling for medical help, but helping remove traces of what had happened. That is not confusion. That is not shock. That is not the behavior of someone who truly believes her child has wandered into the dark. It is evidence of control. The plan was simple. Remove what pointed back to the house, place Logan somewhere outside, and then tell police he was missing. The river would become the focus. The search would move away from the home. The adults could perform fear while the evidence inside the house was being changed. But the problem with trying to erase a crime is that every act of eraser becomes evidence too. The torn pajama top did not disappear from the story. The washed bedsheet did not make the truth vanish. Instead, those actions helped show investigators that this was not a panicked response to an unexplained emergency. It was a calculated attempt to reshape what police would see. In a real missing child case, the home is the starting point of fear. In Logan's case, the home was the place they were trying to protect from scrutiny. They wanted officers to look outside. They wanted the river to explain the tragedy. They wanted the world to imagine a little boy slipping away unnoticed. But their own actions betrayed them. Because people who are searching for a missing child do not usually remove clothing. They do not wash bedding. They do not quietly decide which objects are dangerous. Those objects were dangerous because they told the truth. The pajama top, the bed sheet, the timing, the movement, the cleaning, all of it formed a pattern, not one single detail alone, but all of them together. A pattern of concealment, a pattern of staging, a pattern of adults making choices after a child no longer had a voice. And that is the terrible irony. They tried to erase Logan's final hours, but in doing so, they created the evidence that helped expose them, because the truth was never only in what they said to police, it was in what they tried to hide. Before the 999 call, before the search, before the river became the center of the story, something happened inside Logan Mwangi's home that no one outside that house was there to see. That is one of the hardest parts of this case. There is no clean, complete moment where the truth can be watched from beginning to end. No outside witness saw every movement. No camera captured every second of Logan's final hours. The people who knew exactly what happened were the same people who later tried to hide it. So investigators had to work backward. They had to begin with Logan's body, with his injuries, with the river, with the torn clothing, the washed bedding, the phone activity, the CCTV, and the lies told after he was already gone. And all of it pointed to one conclusion. Whatever happened to Logan did not begin at the river. It began inside the home. The court would later say that Logan had suffered a violent incident before his death. The exact sequence could not be reconstructed with perfect certainty, because the only people inside that house were the people convicted of killing him. But the medical evidence made one thing clear. This was not an accident. This was not a child falling over. This was not something that could be explained away by panic or confusion. Logan was 5 years old. He was small, vulnerable, and completely dependent on the adults around him. If he was hurt, he needed help. If he was in pain, he needed someone to call an ambulance. If he was still alive after the attack, every minute mattered. But help did not come. That is the part that changes the emotional weight of the night, because the cruelty was not only in what was done to Logan, it was also in what was not done afterward. No one called for medical help. No one told the truth. No one in that home chose the truth or Logan's need for help over protecting themselves instead. The adults inside the house began making decisions about how to protect themselves. The focus shifted from saving Logan to hiding what had happened to him. That is when the night became not just a scene of violence, but a scene of calculation. There was Logan to move, evidence to deal with, and a false account to prepare. And by the time morning came, that story was ready. Logan was missing, but the lie depended on the world believing that danger had come from outside, that Logan had somehow left the house on his own, that the river was where the tragedy happened, rather than where the tragedy was placed. The evidence would later show the opposite. The house was the point of origin. The river was part of the staging. And the 999 call was not the beginning of panic. It was the next step in a plan already underway. That is why this night matters so much. It sits in the dark space between the last time Logan was alive and the moment police were asked to search for him. It is the part of the timeline the killers tried hardest to blur. They wanted those hours to be confusing. They wanted them to be unreachable. They wanted the truth to dissolve into the river, the mourning, and the performance of a missing child report. But evidence has a way of surviving the people who try to bury it. The injuries survived, the timeline survived, the objects inside the house survived, and together, they told the story Logan could no longer tell. The night before the call was not an unexplained gap. It was the heart of the case, because by the time Angharad Williamson picked up the phone and told police her son was missing, Logan had already been failed in every way a child can be failed. He had suffered serious harm. He was not given the help he needed. And after that, the truth about what happened to him was hidden behind one final lie. To understand what happened to Logan Mwangi, the investigation had to return to one place: the house, not the river, not the streets, not the outside world the adults wanted police to search. The truth was, inside the home where Logan had spent his final hours, surrounded by the people who should have protected him. There were three of them: Angharad Williamson, Logan's mother; John Cole, her partner and Logan's stepfather; Craig Mulligan, Cole's stepson, who was living in the home at the time. For a 5-year-old child, that house should have been a circle of safety. 3 older people, 3 chances for someone to stop, 3 chances for someone to call for help, 3 chances for one adult, or even one person in that home, to choose Logan over the lie. No one did. That is what makes this part of the case so difficult to sit with. Logan was not taken by a stranger. He was not harmed by someone who came from nowhere. The danger was already inside the story. It was inside the rooms he slept in. It was inside the home where he was supposed to be fed, comforted, and protected. And after he died, the 3 people in that home did not tell the truth. They built a version of events around themselves. Angharad Williamson became the voice of the emergency. She was the one who called police and reported Logan missing. On the surface, that placed her in the role of a terrified mother, a parent waking up to every nightmare at once, a woman asking the authorities to help find her little boy. But the evidence showed something very different. She was not simply outside the cover-up. The judge rejected her claim that she had slept through the critical period. Phone activity and CCTV showed she was awake, moving, and involved in what happened after Logan died. She also helped identify items inside the home that needed to be dealt with: Logan's torn dinosaur pajama top and his bedsheet. That matters because her role was not only emotional, it was practical. She helped create the picture that police were meant to see. John Cole's role was even more direct in the physical staging of the scene. According to the court, he was one of the 2 people who took Logan's body out of the house and brought him to the River Audmoor. The purpose was to make it look as if Logan had left the home and ended up in the water. That act was not just movement, it was misdirection. It turned the river into a false explanation. It tried to make the outside world look responsible for a death that had begun inside the home. It asked police, searchers, and eventually the public to imagine a lost child instead of a murdered one. Craig Mulligan was the 3rd person inside that circle. He was younger than the adults, but the court still found him criminally responsible. He was involved alongside Cole in moving Logan's body to the river, and he too became part of the false story built after Logan's death. That is why this section should not be treated like a list of names. It is not enough to say who they were. The real question is what each of them did when Logan needed help. One called police with a story that was not true. One helped carry Logan away from the house. One joined in the act that turned a child's body into part of a staged disappearance. And all 3 stood between Logan and the truth. The house was not just the place where Logan lived. By the end, it had become a closed system. The people inside controlled what was said about him, what was hidden, what was cleaned, what was moved, and what police were first asked to believe. That is the nightmare at the center of this case. A child can be surrounded by people and still be completely alone. Logan was 5 years old. He could not challenge their version of events. He could not explain his injuries. He could not tell police who had hurt him, who had failed to help him, or who had carried him out of the house before sunrise. So the evidence had to speak for him. The phone records, the CCTV, the bedding, the pajama top, the river. Piece by piece, those details showed that the people inside Logan's home were not confused witnesses to a tragedy. They were part of the tragedy itself. And once that became clear, the investigation no longer had to ask whether danger had entered the house. It had always been there. By the time the case reached Cardiff Crown Court, the story of Logan Mwangi as a missing child had already collapsed. What remained was something much colder. 3 people stood before the court: Angharad Williamson, Logan's mother, John Cole, his stepfather, and Craig Mulligan, Cole's stepson. All 3 had been inside the world Logan could not escape. All 3 had been part of the story police were first asked to believe, and all 3 were now facing the question the evidence had been building toward from the beginning. What really happened to Logan? The trial lasted 10 weeks. During that time, the court heard how the defendants had tried to convince police that Logan had gone missing overnight. But the prosecution case did not rest on that story. It rested on what the story could not explain. It could not explain Logan's injuries. It could not explain why his body was found in the River Audmoor shortly after the emergency call. It could not explain the actions taken inside the home before police arrived. And it could not explain why the people closest to Logan behaved less like witnesses to a sudden tragedy and more like participants in a cover-up. The physical evidence was devastating. Logan had suffered more than 56 external injuries. The court heard that his injuries were so extreme they were comparable to what might be seen after a fall from a great height or a high-speed road traffic collision. But Logan had not been in a road traffic collision. He had not fallen from a great height. He was a 5-year-old boy in his own home. That fact sat at the center of the trial. The courtroom was not being asked to decide whether something terrible had happened to Logan. That was already clear. The question was who was responsible and who had helped bury the truth afterward. The answer, according to the verdicts, was all 3. John Cole, Angharad Williamson, and Craig Mulligan were convicted of murder. Cole pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice. Williamson and Mulligan were found guilty of that offense after trial. In her sentencing remarks, Mrs. Justice Jefford said they had all been convicted of Logan's murder and were all responsible for his death and the anguish that followed. That statement matters because it removes the last hiding place. This was not a case where one person acted while everyone else remained confused, innocent, or unaware. The court found responsibility across the people inside the home. The same home where Logan should have been protected became the place where violence, neglect, and silence closed around him. On June 30th, 2022, the sentences were handed down. John Cole was jailed for life and ordered to serve a minimum of 29 years before he could be considered for release. Angharad Williamson was jailed for life with a minimum term of 28 years. Craig Mulligan was ordered to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure for a minimum of 15 years. Legally, that was the moment the case reached its answer. But emotionally, the answer only made the case heavier because a conviction can name responsibility, but it cannot give Logan back the help he needed in those final hours. It cannot undo the moment when no one called an ambulance. It cannot erase the image of adults preparing a false missing child story, while a 5-year-old boy was already beyond saving. In court, the lie was finally stripped down. Logan had not wandered away. He had not vanished into the night. He had been murdered by people inside his own home. And then his death had been disguised as a disappearance. The trial did not just convict 3 people. It exposed the truth they tried to make impossible to see. The convictions answered the first question: who was responsible for Logan's death? The court gave that answer clearly. Angharad Williamson, John Cole, and Craig Mulligan were responsible for his murder. They were also responsible for the lie that followed the staged disappearance, the false panic, the attempt to move the truth away from the house and into the river. But once the legal answer was in place, another question remained, a harder one. How did Logan become so unseen before he died? Because this case does not end with 3 convictions. It cannot. A courtroom can name guilt. It can impose sentences. It can say who was responsible under the law, but it cannot fully answer why a 5-year-old boy, already known to services, could become isolated inside a home where danger was growing around him. That is where the story widens. Not away from Logan, but around him. Before his death, Logan had already been part of a child protection picture. There had been concerns. There had been injuries. There had been professional involvement. There were agencies, meetings, records, and decisions. On paper, Logan was not completely invisible. But paper is not the same as protection. A child can exist in documents and still disappear in real life. That is one of the most painful lessons in this case. The system had pieces of Logan's story, but those pieces did not come together strongly enough. One concern could be treated as isolated. One explanation could be accepted. One missed visit could be explained away. One adult's version of events could become the dominant version. And slowly, the full picture became blurred. That matters because child protection is not only about responding when something is obviously wrong. It is about noticing when small details begin to form a pattern. A child who is injured, a child who is described very differently at home than at school, a child who becomes harder to see, a child whose contact with people outside the home becomes weaker, a child whose world begins to shrink. None of those details alone tells the whole story, but together they should have raised deeper questions. Not just, what explanation has been given, but does that explanation fit everything we know? In Logan's case, the Child Practice Review later examined how professionals and agencies were involved before his death. It looked at the impact of COVID-19, at information sharing, at decision-making, at professional challenge, and at whether the child himself was truly being seen inside the process. That phrase matters. The child himself, because in safeguarding, the adult story is never enough. Adults can minimize, adults can mislead, adults can perform cooperation. Adults can explain away injuries, isolation, behavior, and fear. But a child's condition, environment, voice, body language, and access to the outside world can tell a very different story. The danger is that systems can become too focused on what adults say and not focused enough on what the child is living. By the time police were called on July 31st, 2021, it was too late to ask Logan what had happened, too late to hear him, too late to see what he had been living with. The only voice left was evidence, injuries, timelines, objects, CCTV, and the trail of a cover-up. That is why this case still matters after the verdict, because justice after death is not the same as protection before death. Logan's killers were named. They were sentenced. The lie was exposed, but the deeper warning remains. When a child becomes isolated, when adults control the narrative, when warning signs are separated across different files and different agencies, the system cannot afford to be passive. It has to be curious. It has to challenge. It has to connect the pieces before the pattern becomes fatal. Logan did not only need someone to find him that morning. He needed someone to truly see him before then. After the verdicts, it would be easy to tell this story as if the ending explained everything. 3 people were convicted. The lie was exposed. The court named who was responsible. But Logan Mwangi's case demands a deeper question. Not only who killed him, but how the danger around him was allowed to become so hidden. That question does not reduce the responsibility of the people who murdered him. It does not shift blame away from the adults inside that house. They were responsible for what happened to Logan. They were the ones who failed to call for help. They were the ones who tried to turn his death into a disappearance. But child protection cases are rarely only about the final moment. They are also about the pattern before it. And with Logan, the pattern was there. There had been injuries. There had been concerns. There had been professional involvement. Logan had been known to services before his death. That means this was not a case where a child was completely outside the system. In some ways, that makes it even more troubling, because Logan was not invisible on paper. He was invisible in practice. That is the first failure to understand. A child can be written about in reports, discussed in meetings, and still not be truly seen. Professionals can record information without fully connecting it. Agencies can each hold one piece of the picture without anyone stepping back and asking what the whole image shows. A bruise can be explained. A missed contact can be excused. A parent's account can be accepted. A child's absence can be rationalized. But when those details begin to repeat, they stop being isolated events. They become a pattern. In Logan's case, one of the most important issues was the danger of relying too heavily on adult narratives. Adults control access. Adults answer the door. Adults explain injuries. Adults explain behavior. Adults explain behavior. Adults explain why a child cannot be seen today, why a child is difficult, why a child is isolated, why everything is under control. But the adult story is not always the child's reality. That is why direct sight of the child matters so much. Not as a box-ticking exercise, but as a safeguard. A child's face, body language, physical condition, voice, and behavior can all reveal things that adults may minimize or hide. When professionals do not see the child clearly and regularly, the case can become built around what adults say instead of what the child is living. And in a dangerous home, that is exactly where the risk grows. The second failure was information sharing. No single agency may have held the full picture. Health may have seen one part. Social services may have seen another. School may have seen a different version of Logan altogether. Family members may have had concerns or contact that could have mattered. But child protection depends on connection. It depends on asking whether separate details placed side by side begin to tell a more serious story. The danger is not always one dramatic red flag. Sometimes it is 5 smaller warnings that no one connects in time. The third issue was professional curiosity. That phrase can sound soft, but in cases like this, it is life or death. Professional curiosity means not accepting the easiest explanation simply because it is offered confidently. It means asking the next question. It means challenging inconsistencies. It means noticing when a child is being described one way at home and another way by school. It means asking why contact is becoming harder, why the child is less visible, why the explanation always seems to protect the adult more than the child. Curiosity is not suspicion for its own sake, it is protection. Then there was COVID-19. The pandemic created real barriers. Services were disrupted. Home visits became harder. Isolation rules changed how professionals accessed families. But COVID cannot become a blanket explanation for what happened to Logan. It did not kill him. The people inside his home did. What COVID did was make an already dangerous situation easier to hide. It gave adults more reasons to limit contact. It made professionals more dependent on remote communication and adult explanations. It widened the gap between the child as described and the child as actually seen. And when a child is already vulnerable, that gap can become deadly. The final failure is the one that sits at the center of the case. Logan's voice was not strong enough in the system around him. He was 5 years old. He could not advocate for himself. He could not gather evidence. He could not challenge the adults controlling his world. So the responsibility belonged to everyone else to see him, to question what did not fit, to connect the warnings, and to act before the final emergency call. By the time police were told Logan was missing, the system could only respond to the aftermath. That is, the tragedy. Justice came after Logan was gone, but protection had to come before. And in Logan's case, the lesson is painfully clear. When a child becomes harder to see, that is not a reason to step back. It is the reason to move closer. Logan Mwangi was 5 years old. That is the fact this case always has to return to. Before the trial, before the evidence, before the CCTV, the phone records, the washed bedding, and the river, Logan was a little boy who should have been safe in his own home. He should have been protected by the adults around him. He should have been seen clearly by the systems meant to safeguard him. Instead, he was failed in the most complete way. His killers were convicted. The lie was exposed. The court gave the case a legal ending, but no sentence can change what happened in the hours before that 999 call. No verdict can give Logan the ambulance that was never called. No judgment can return the chances that were missed before the danger became fatal. And that is why this case cannot end only in a courtroom. It has to end with a warning. When a child becomes isolated, that matters. When adults control the entire story around that child, that matters. When injuries, absences, explanations, and behavioral concerns are scattered across different people in different files, they cannot be treated as separate details forever. At some point, the pattern has to be seen, because protection is not just responding when the worst has already happened. Protection is asking harder questions before it does. Logan did not need the world to search for him after he was gone. He needed someone to see him while he was still here. He needed someone to question the explanations, connect the signs, and move closer when he became harder to reach. We tell stories like this not to repeat the tragedy, but to recognize the pattern. Logan Mwangi deserved more than justice after death. He deserved protection in life.